Good morning. It is Tuesday, 21st, and actually it's 10:20 in the morning, a little earlier than usually than when I record. And I have some little extra time this morning, so I thought I would use it to my Gifted and Talented 5743 class, which is I have to tell you that you all impressed me very much. You offer thoughtful thinking in your discussions. You respond to each other. Your journal responses indicate some nice research and your an application of the things that we've done in the class and the readings that we've been concentrating on. And I can't ask for much more than that in order for you to become the best kind of leaders that you can be, to serve the populations that you choose to serve as well, which is about one of the most important things I can think of for the 21st century. Equity, after all, quality of opportunity is perhaps the key issue of the 21st century, socio-politically, socio-economically, and certainly educationally as well. And you can see how they all run together in a future that you are going to shape. And hopefully you'll have the muscles and tools to do that by way of having participated in this program. Particularly, I just saw an email this morning from, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce the young lady's name. The last name is Dhima, who had been congratulated by Dr. Figueroa Murphy about her presentation in the this past weekend's meeting. I know there was another lady who also presented. Maybe they presented together. I'm not sure. And being praised to the skies by Dr. Figueroa Murphy, and then in response, the student from this class raved about her experience in that. So that's nice to hear. It's nice that you A, could contribute to something as important as that, and B, get something from it. And up the road, there'll be more things to do this. I used to not run. I used to teach this program when it first began about 10 years ago. Had my own class of people like yourself in a cohort. And we began to take some of those things that we did back then on the road. I mean, the class did some spectacular things. And it's just smiling because we haven't been part of that program. And sometimes until this particular semester, and I really do hope that I can continue to be teaching in this program now, because I really very much believe in it from a futures-based change leadership point of view that I'm going to begin to share with you more readily. You had a video I posted up Sunday, and that video, I'm calling that video 1 for this week, the week of 3/19 to 3/26. And that video was chiefly devoted to the mechanical housekeeping things of the week, the discussion question, which was about posting up your needs assessment strategies and what goal you think you're trying to solve as far as project leadership or multi-age classrooms are concerned. And also the journal question. I spent a good amount of time in looking at a PowerPoint about needs assessing, and that you should be choosing those strategies that you thought you would use if this were a real project. It's not a real project. You don't have to do the needs assessments themselves. But when you get the chance to do them, I'm smiling. Hopefully you can dip back into your memory bank and remember what we practice here. And so we did a few other things. I don't remember everything we did. Did a few other things along the same lines. And then I think I made a good move by not going into the content areas, so that that's what this video will be about. It'll be a shorter video. And really what's evolving in my own mind from my own status as an instructor is I'm seeing 2 videos a week. I'm seeing one about how you progress through the last assignment, and I'm seeing another one about content issues. And that's pretty much whatever I think that it is. I'm going to try to stay as close to the syllabus as I can by way of adhering at this point chiefly to Follin and to Koza as the 2 texts, but I'll probably move off them pretty quickly as well, knowing how my mind starts to spin off into different places, all of which will help you get your arms around this whole premise of change, which is what this is about. So now we're going to get our fingernails more nearly dirty in that for the rest of the semester. I'm smiling out of absolute embarrassment now. There's something else occurred to me. And then there's a couple of you in this class who have been very kind with emails to me. I appreciate them smiling. I have friends I have never met. I can't find in the academic calendar whether you have a Easter break. I'm just wondering whether you have an Easter break, and that doesn't make any difference to me. I just keep teaching every week anyway and posting up videos. But if anyone can find whether there's an Easter break and whether you have a week off, why should I belabor you and have you do extra work if you should have a week off? I know you have Easter weeks or Holy Weeks or spring break weeks off, and if you're in the public school sector, I get that. And we can't observe all of those things necessarily, but in the end, I would certainly want to give you a week off someplace in there, if there is one. So, Pamela, I'm thinking of you, but there's other people as well who are my consciences in this class. Somebody tell me if there's an Easter break. I'll call it that. We'll go from there. All right, so we have a couple of different ways I'm going to approach this second video. I'm going to call it the content video. Excuse me, I have to. Yeah, take that phone down. It would interrupt you, and you are the important people at this point. Okie doke. So what I'm going to do from this point, I'm going to begin to post videos I'm going to research some videos that I think we can use as aids in learning from the class. Some of them I'll ask you to watch on your own. Some I will use within my one-way conversations with you, which is largely what I'm going to do today. And then I'm going to back them into Koza and into Fullen and Hargreaves where they're appropriate. So for those of you who ask these questions, I'm right now going to concentrate on the last chapter in the Fullen and Hargreaves book, which in many ways is by far and away the most important chapter, I think. And I'm going to concentrate to some extent, maybe not quite to the same extent, on the Koza chapter 5. Now, if you look at the Koza book, the way it's divided, in my view, the book at the end of chapter 5 as you can see, moves to a different section. It talks more about instruction and assessment. And we can talk about those things. I have plenty of muscles in those things, and we will. But in terms of this being a leadership course, I want to throw my eggs into the leadership basket, particularly into change. I may have given you this phrase before. It's from one of my books. I haven't brought my books up yet, but I'm going to start using them in a couple of weeks. And you don't have to buy them. I'm just going to talk to them as such. Where I pretty much equate change with transformation. Fair enough. But that isn't enough. So what I did was I came up with a little quasi-algebraic formula for that. Here it is. No, it's not even an equation. Here it comes. Transformation equals new ways to change. I'm sorry. Start it again. Transformation equals change, and change and transformation together equal new ways to realize. When was the last time you realized something differently than what you always thought? And how or to what extent did it change your own behaviors or beliefs? It doesn't happen often. Think about that. When did you really change your mind about something? So much that you've changed your behaviors. I'm not saying that it hasn't happened to you personally or professionally. It certainly has happened to me. I can show you all kinds of stories about how it's happened to me over my much longer lifetime than yours. But it's something you have to kind of sit back and think about for a moment. Sounds like that might be a good discussion question, but I'm not going to give you any more work to do this week. But when was the last time you were transformed? How did it happen? Did it happen sort of by suddenly, or did it happen over a long? I'll give you one quick story. As I told you, I mentor dissertation students at St. John's. So I'm the kind of chair where I help these people move through their dissertation process in order for them to be achieving a doctoral degree. I have a student who, I'm not sure of all of the background, but I have a student who has worked with the prison population in Rikers Island. Okay, she canceled them, but I think she's a counselor. And she's studying 5 ex-female prisoners who have been released from prison, some of them after 30 years. I can't guess what they did to be in prison for 30 years. And part of what that research is about is what is how they've changed, whether they've changed. And the research is, I'm smiling, is very stunning, even for the researcher. She's kind of shocked herself about what she's seeing coming out of that. So imagine whether you or could you be transformed with new ways to realize after being in prison for 30 years. I can't even imagine being in prison for 30 minutes and not being transformed, like, get me out of here. But just kind of interesting. So again, what kinds of experiences or kinds of leadership can you exert to change, to bring that all together? So that's the key issue. And we're going to really pretty much ring that bell for the rest of the semester. And here it comes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up a couple of videos. Bear with me for a minute. And that's always a clumsy thing for me to do. And as I pull up these videos, what I'm going to do is stop and go. I hear something I think that's important, I'm going to stop and go. And after we finish those, I'm going to try to back those ideas into how I interpret Fullen's chapter 7, Fullen and Hargrave's chapter 7, and Kozer's chapter 5. And I'm going to kind of flip-flop in and among Kozer. But for the moment, if you're looking for a chapter that you want to concentrate on, it's chapter 5. For those of you who want to go forward in reading Kozer, just keep reading a chapter. I'll catch back up to those things. I guess chapter 6 is probably the next one in the list, so to speak, as such. So with that in mind, I'm going to pull up a couple different videos. Bear with me. I have to make sure I have the right one before I pull it up. I think they're in the right order here. Yeah, I think they are. So I'm going to share the screen. Drag it over. Make it big.
Alice needs change in her company. Her task is to promote innovation and growth and to make sure her organization has a positive.
Okay, you heard a different word than you're used to. It's company. Understand the difference and the similarity. Company is not a school, neither is a school a company. Heaven forbid that they're the same if you think about it. However, companies and schools are the same from a very fundamental point of view, and that's from organization. A company is an organization with a purpose, more often than not, to make money. A school is an organization, more often than not, purposed to educate children. But they're both organizations.
Impact in all what they are doing. When you are in charge of a change process, it's a jungle out there. It feels that Alice and her colleagues are lost. They are surrounded by green chaos, unknown vegetation, and strange sounds. They ask themselves again and again, how did we get into this, and how will we get out? Luckily, Alice has a special superpower. She can fly above the field and develop a broad view. From there, she can detect structures in the chaos and see the whole field. And from above, Alice realizes, hey, I'm part of a group of people with diverse talents which they can apply to bring about positive change. They are curious about what the change brings, and they act with passion, courage, and compassion. and I can see the path and the goal. And we become aware that we have a treasure chest with us containing all kinds of helpful tools for change. Once Alice and her teammates apply their skills and know their tools, they'll start to work themselves through the forest full of optimism. That is not the end of the story. On their way, they get stopped many times. There are a lot of challenges to master, but the journey continues. By remembering her capacity to lead change, Alice can help the team to reach the summit. If you want to become a leader of change, join us for an exciting learning journey. Visit us at berlinchangedays.com.
Okay, now I would not, I've used this actually. I've actually used a version of this story in one of the books I've written. As a matter of fact, it's a little different. It's based on Stephen Covey. If you haven't read Covey, you should put Covey down on your list of things to do. Stephen Covey, Covey. His most famous book, the book I'm referring to, is The 7 Habits of an Effective. Oh, I forgot it now. The 7 Habits of an Effective Leader. I may have my title a little bit more, but it's The 7 Habits of Effective Leadership. I think is a better way to put it. He uses this story. I like his version better than this version, so I want to use that one for a moment. Although the premise is the same. My fingers are crossed, so I don't forget the magic word here. His story is about a group of people on a safari in the middle of a jungle who are completely lost. They need to get out of the jungle before the alligators and the snakes and something bites them and takes them away. So what happens is they have a couple of people, men. I said men. I should have said people with machete knives, and they're cutting their way through the thick underbrush, trying to clear a path for the rest of the safari to move along. And they're thoroughly lost. So here are these people clearing away the brush. They're moving forward, but they don't exactly know where they're going until someone climbs the tree. This story was about a person with wings. In Covey's story, it's about climbing a tree. A woman climbs a tree. She goes to the top of the tree. She looks down and she says, "You're going the wrong way." Okay. Please see the difference. You're going the wrong way. As you're doing, in the trees, you're clearing them away, taking care of all kinds of things, but you don't have a plan to move forward. You don't have your toolkit, to use this version's term. You're not using the toolkit that you have, whether it be people's brains, whether it be a compass, or whether it be some other way to get around all that undergrowth and those crocodiles. You're going the wrong way. And then what they have to do is then pool their resources to create. Here comes the word. Now, this is the word that this video uses, and when I want to use with you. And that would be, you create the capacity. You create the capacity. Capacity is about having the skill sets, the knowledge, sometimes the physical needs, in order for you to meet any challenge. I saw something on Facebook yesterday where someone said, "You can't raise your children." This is not the exact quote. You can't raise your children to live in this world because the world they're going to live in isn't yet. So how do you answer that? That's true. So how do you answer that? You give them the capacity to live in the future that we haven't necessarily visualized it very well, if at all. Teach them how to problem solve. Teach them how to think. You teach them how to read and write, and how to get along with each other. Those are capacity toolkit issues. Now, in your case, you're going to get jobs where you're going to be leading change. And among the many things you need to do, not even necessarily the first thing, is this premise of creating capacity, which is to say you have to diagnose what you have, to diagnose the culture that you have. You've been through some hard things the past couple of weeks, as you know, and the tests so far are coming back pretty good. So I got a very big test result back yesterday. And nurse said, everything looks good. I said, okay, thank God. And I said, does this mean I can run around the block? as an exercise? She said, sure. I mean, you're not going to run a marathon, no, but I would like to be able to run around the block. And she said, yeah, fine, of course. If you don't feel well, you stop. And then I said, does this mean I can go to Disney World, which is where I'm supposed to be going in very briefly for a couple of weeks with my grandchildren. I was kind of worried that I couldn't go with them. And she said, of course you can go to Disney World. I've got the capacity to go to Disney World. The teachers whom you're going to lead, whether you have led them or about to lead them in internship experiences, or whether you finally qualify for having a project leader job someplace where you're an E&L teacher, rather assistant principal in charge of E&L programs, or in central office, which, by the way, I do recommend you get the second degree certification on that, or whether you are a chair person. In any of those cases, you need to assess the capacity of yourself as well as of your group to measure yourself to get what you need in order to be able to sustain the change you shouted. Okay, so that's just a little quick one. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you to take notes on that, but I do want you to think of two premises as we move through a couple of more videos here, each of which is, well, there's three, but one is much also brief, is each of which is the concepts. Now, the two concepts I've mentioned to you is a definition of transformation, of creating a plan, a program that's going to work and sustain itself, so it's not just a 50-yard dash and never happens again. And for that to happen, you've got to create the capacity, and you also have to have the mindset of realizing that realizing is what makes you transform. This is kind of cocky of me to say this to you. Did you transform just a little bit in this last couple of minutes? Did something new occur to you by way of my little pitter patter that you think may have changed the way you realize insofar as what leadership is about? I hope so, but that's probably not necessarily a fair question because it's self-serving. So we're going to take that one out. I'm going to go to my friend Michael Fullen. I leave Andy Hargraves out, which is really kind of silly because Hargraves is one of my intellectual idols. Fullen I admire very much, but Hargraves is my kind of person because Hargraves is a futurist, and we'll come to that word. You're going to be sick of hearing that word before the semester is finished. That's another question. I don't know when the semester finishes. I think the first week in May. Not that I'm rushing it, but I just want to make sure I don't keep people any longer than you want to be kept. This is a brief introduction of Fullen's premises of change. I think it's 2 or 3 minutes long, 2.5 minutes long. And it is kind of a prelude to the book that you're reading, or will have read by now. And there's also another half-hour video that I'm not going to, today at least, bring you through. That's obviously much more detailed. But I just wanted to see the overview of some of the premises that are in that chapter 7.
Practice. So it's practice to theory, not the other way around. And that's reassuring because we know that it works because it's being pulled out of the actual examples. Secondly, the secrets, and they have labels that you can't really, until you get inside them, know them. But the secrets are: love your employees as much as your customers. I'm using language from the broader literature. Connect peers with purpose. Build capacity building over judgmental.
Oh my, did we just hear that C word again? Capacity. 2 C words so far in this lesson. And you'll hear them a million times. Capacity and I just waited for 6 seconds because 6 seconds is the classic teacher wait time premise, but it doesn't work when you're trying to teach this way. Sometimes I used to play hangman with people, but I haven't got the time to build a hangman noose for you. Culture, capacity, and culture.
Learning is the work, transparency rules, and systems learned. So those are only words when you put them at that level. But what those are, if you take the middle chord, sequence 2 to 5, which are zeroing in on instructional practice, that really gets us to get at the classroom and the school in a way that, in a very
Now, in your case, instructional practice, and I found, I'm sure that you've looked for these on your own across your careers. There's tons of videos about instructional practice in general, and good ones, good practices, good videos. And there's tons of videos about, as you've already seen, and some other things I posted for you the past couple of weeks about inculcating. I never used that word in my life before. About implementing effective instructional practices for English language learners. But there's nothing about implementing a program. I couldn't find a thing about implementing an English language learner program. If we were on the same class right now, and I like this idea, I guess I'll use it the next time I teach this course. Maybe we can do it together. If you want to try that, let me know. Maybe we can figure something out. Is create a video that we can upload to YouTube with all our names on it, saying this is how you institute a good, maybe multi-age instructional program devoted to our English language learners. That would be fun. Let's play with that idea a little bit. I know a couple of you already are thinking about this. I'm waiting for your emails.
precise way starts to change the nature of literacy, numeracy, and other aspects, and gets better results. So that I think what we're constantly doing really is pulling out the successes we're observing and representing them, sometimes in video, sometimes in written in the books. But we're trying to capture the best of what's going on, make it available, and then be able to more clearly describe it, and to have people that are doing it describe it clearly, because they're the ones that have the specificity. So it's a learning operation, and it's organization learning, it's individual learning, it's system learning, and the premier, incidentally, Dalton McGuinty, exemplifies this when he gets.
He's used the word systems 3 times, I think, at least twice, maybe 3 times. We talked about systems. We haven't hit it hard, all right? But here the word systems. And for example, when we talked about Peter Senge, we said there were 5 disciplines that Senge had identified. One of them was systems. It wasn't the only one that he identified. And systems is the connectivity among the parts of an organization that need to be in sync with each other in order for the whole, with a W, to be healthy. And I'm pretty sure I mentioned, but bears repeating, that I did a study with a dissertation. No, I didn't do it. One of my mentees did. Did a study with, I don't know why Siri.
Still on it.
Be quiet, Siri. I did a study with one of my.
Gave a speech to the principal.
With one of my mentees, who was in charge of the middle schools in Queens, New York City. And what he did was he found a survey instrument, and I had warned you about survey instruments last week, but this was a very good survey instrument where he surveyed teachers, middle school teachers, and he surveyed their administrators to see whether they perceived the presence of, the existence of, the operation of the 5 pieces of Senge's disciplines. That is to say, the ability to recognize systems, the ability to recognize positive mental models, the ability to work in teams, the ability to professionally develop themselves, and the ability to have a shared vision. Now, he administered the survey. It's a pretty complicated survey. He came back, and one thing that came out straight away was that the teachers did not feel the same as the administrators, and vice versa, which was scary if you think about it. But even more interestingly was he found, without a doubt, that the schools that scored highest on the nicest slat were the schools with the highest scores in the whole survey about the 5 disciplines, about systems thinking. So how do I make change together if the people don't know how to think systemically, think together, listen to each other, have good mental models, know how to recognize how systems interact with each other? We'll talk more about that before the year is over.
A few months ago, he said there are 3 qualities of leadership One is leaders always have hope. One is that they're selfless, they serving others, and the third is they're always learners. And he said that about, he gave examples from his own role. So I would say that what we stand for here is that this is a learning, this is complex work. It's a learning proposition. Only in this case, it has to be the organization's learning, and that's really what the strategy.
Oh my, here is that word, organization again. I think that's enough of that. I think we have that pretty good handle on that. Okay, as you can see, I'm trying to combine some premises here. And whatever notes you choose to take on that, feel free to do, because you can watch this more than once. Now, the third video, I have to explain a little bit. Yeah, I'm not going to start it yet. All right, but I just want you to see this name down here in the middle left. McREL International. All right, McREL is a regional group charged by the federal government to create professional development and guidance for school systems to manage change. People, what you don't know, I don't think you do, most people at your level of research at this point are not aware of, is that you have federal government has divided the country into regions and has assigned different groups different premises. I don't remember where McREL is most responsible for, but it doesn't matter, because anyone from the whole country can tap into McREL. But their responsibility is managing change. There are other ones out there too, and I can't remember any of them. WestEd is another one. I worked for them for a little bit. They're out in the West. They're in Phoenix, Arizona. They take the whole West Coast up, and they spend a lot of time on special education issues, as well as math instruction, but among other things. So when you see some of these groups, pay a lot of attention to them, because what they've done is they've put together a lot of research. Now, you might look down your nose and say, well, this research is from 2016. And I would say, that's a valid objection to some extent. But the research hasn't changed. The research is, if anything, it has just been improved based on these things that they found. Now, this is almost a little more than a half hour long. I have no intention to have you watch this entire video. I'm going to put the link up. What I'm going to do now is play it for probably 10 minutes and jump in and out. And then after we do that, we're going to spend some more time on another video.
For 30 minutes with about a 20 or 25-minute presentation, and then some time for question and answer at the end. You can ask a question at any time by typing it into the chat window, and we'll be collecting and combining your questions as we go along, and then Matt will address them at the end of the session. For those who might not be familiar with McREL, we are a nonprofit, nonpartisan education research and development organization that studies best practices in teaching, leading, and learning. And then we turn that knowledge into practical guidance and training for teachers and education leaders. Our presenter today is Dr. Matt Seebohm, a senior director at McREL, who specializes in leadership development and systems improvement. Dr. Seebohm is a former teacher.
Did you hear those words? Leadership development. That's to say, that's what you're involved with yourselves. And there's that S word, systems.
Well, and a program supervisor. And now at McREL, he works with school districts across the country on systemic strategic leadership training and coaching. In today's session, Matt will be discussing what our research and analysis has revealed to be the key steps to successfully initiating, implementing, and monitoring change in your schools. And with that, Matt, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Roger, and welcome everyone. Great to be joining everyone who's tuned in today, and I do appreciate you taking the time. Obviously, this is a webinar. It's looking at some content that is going to be kind of thrown at you in a pretty rapid succession, but we'll be sharing some examples, and I'll also be, able to stop and help you to make some connections. If you have questions, we will gather those, and at the end, we will get to those questions. So without further ado, let's get started. First off, I love this slide because it kind of gives a great overview of what change really is. And all of us, I know, have seen this off ramp at some point, even though whether it's metaphorical or real, life's full of changes, whether it's professional or personal. And in our balanced leadership work here at McREL, we've really taken some time to understand how change affects people in leadership positions in schools, in school districts, and whether that's a principal, whether that's a teacher leader, whether that's, at any level within the system. So with that, I just want you to frame your thinking today, regardless of what your role is, around this idea of how change impacts those around you. Not just you, but other people, those you may supervise, those you may be responsible for leading, or for setting an example for, whether you're a teacher leader, whether you're a principal, whether.
And Dr. Seaman has made a very important point, and something that's it's probably so obvious that people don't pay any attention to it. And I use the same premise that Dr. Seaman speaks to in a different way when I will be working with you on futuring down the line in terms of change making. But the point was, really, I'm going to use my word rather than his, but he talked about how does the change affects across the board. You don't always think about that until it's too late. And that's when you run into trouble, when you haven't accounted for all the variables or the people or groups that the change may be affecting. This is not a great example, but it's the first one that comes to mind. Is a war story, very quick. New superintendent comes in and says to me, at that point I was the assistant superintendent, and said, I want you to change the bus schedule. Why he did that is a political reason I won't bore you with for them, at least not anytime soon. So I said, okay, it's my job. So I'm working on changing the schedule. All the elementary schools were in tiers. There was an early tier, started at 8:30, I think, and then second tier that started at 9:30. And then you could see one got out at 2:30, one got out at 3:30. And that had not changed in 25 years. He wanted to flip them. And again, the reason why he did that wasn't an educational reason. It was more nearly a political one, quite frankly. So I'm going ahead with a study on it, and I get the word out to the community that this is what's going on. And then, wow, we did not foresee the impact and the responses from the community about that, let alone the staff, but that's another story. Because if you think about it, a simple change like changing the time when school opens and closes, and how you would transport children back and forth to that, if you do that, is about all the other groups that are affected by that. I mean, the most obvious one is, we'll leave children out of this for a minute. The most obvious one is babysitting. If it's a single parent family or a double family for that matter, it might really affect their work schedules and how they have to arrange to have the children covered when they're not home. The soccer coach, the parish soccer coach, I got very upset because that changed his practice session schedule. Other coaches got unhappy about it because how they scheduled inter-district competitions because now that the teams weren't available at the same time. Those are cross impacts that people don't pay attention to. Now, for example, I'm going to change the model of teaching ENL children. I'm going to go bilingual, or I'm going to go duolingo. I think there's two different things on that, if I'm not mistaken. Or I'm going to integrate them all into classrooms, regardless of their level of English. Think you are better aware of the impacts of that than I am.
You're a superintendent. Change is always around us. And some would say change is the only thing we can depend on in schools and school systems. For our outcomes for this session, again, just a short period of time together, but we want to talk to you about first and second order change. We see change in two ways and beyond, but especially in two ways. We see some changes as being first order. Those technical types of changes we can make without too much pain and suffering. The other changes we call second order changes. Those are those changes that are extremely difficult to make and have all kinds of agonizing and painful processes with them at times. Secondly, we have a process we want you to understand and we want to share a little bit more about with you, and that is what we call our phases of change. And lastly, we're going to share with you a few strategies for managing change, kind of an intro to the work we do here at McREL related to leadership and change. So with that, we do frame our leadership work, whether that's with superintendents, principals, or teacher leaders, around something we call the Balanced Leadership Framework. The Balanced Leadership Framework takes our research on leadership and our findings on leadership and breaks that down into areas that schools and school districts deal with and interact with quite a lot. The first one being the focus of leadership. How can you lead if you don't have a focus? So the idea of focus is that we are not just focusing on anything, but helping educators focus on the right work. So within that, there are actually 7 what we call leadership responsibilities. And I should say there's a total of 21. There is a little bit of overlap. Secondly, in this framework, we have what we call community. We call this a purposeful community. And within this one, there are also some leadership responsibilities associated. But those of you that are listening, and when you're thinking about whatever your role is as a leader, if you're not focused on the focus, so to speak, if you're not paying attention to the community, which is all about the school culture, then how can you move a school or a school system forward and manage the change necessary to move that school from one level to another? Because it's in education, it's all, as you know, it's all about getting better wherever you are. Whether you're a top performer, there's still room for improvement, or whether you're struggling and low performing, there's room for improvement. So part of getting better, and one of the keystone starting points, is going to be how you manage change. And there's 7 responsibilities associated with managing change.
All right. I'm going to try to move that back.
Let's take a look at these. I'm not going to, wherever you are, whether you're
As a professor of doctoral education, often I'm big, but it certainly applies to you folks. By the way, all of you should go for your doctorate. You're all brilliant people. Would be that what we call models. This is a model. Sometimes we call it a conceptual framework. Maybe it's a better way to describe it. And it looks so simple, but it's really not. It's showing the circular energies associated with change, community, and focus. What I really like about this particularly, and we're not going to get to it today unless you choose to watch it on your own, is the one about building purposeful school community. Often the weak sister of these kinds of things, sometimes ignored, sometimes distorted, sometimes overlooked. And that's when change issues can really come back and bite you in the ankle.
You're a top performer, there's still room for improvement, or whether you're struggling and low performing, there's room for improvement. So part of getting better, and one of the keystone starting points, is going to be how you manage change. And there's 7 responsibilities associated with managing change. So let's take a look at these. I'm not going to read these to you, but I do want to point out a couple of these. So when you are managing change, when you jump into it as a leader, we refer.
All right, let's slice this at this point. I just want to make sure I pick this up from 6 minutes in for next week. Look at the charts. Those are your responsibilities when you're managing an E&L program implementation or a multi-aids classroom or some combination of that. A, you're the change agent. B, you need to be flexible. That's clean enough. C, you need to be very clear about what and be able to develop consensus among that community group as well as your other stakeholders about what their strong ideas and beliefs are about. If you don't know what they are, then you're violating somebody's, and that's when you're not going to get buy-in and often get conflict that will overrun what you're trying to get done. You need to get people turned on intellectually. You need to offer them new ways to think. Well, I didn't think of that. I didn't know that. No, and to push that along. clearly you need have, if you're not, don't know it, then you need to certainly assure yourself that you've got people who are working with you and helping you to have complete knowledge of how the curriculum changes you're looking at are taught and how they're assessed. Oh, by the way, how they're assessed, he said. All right, and how you monitor the program in order for you to be sure that the program is going in the right direction, and then what you need to do to make it even better. Now, rhetorical question. I want to wait 6 seconds again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 premises there. In your estimation, in terms of yourself and your strengths, what are you strongest at now? I think I hear Elizabeth answered me, and she said, well, I'm really strong in monitoring and evaluation. Okay, Elizabeth, now what are you not so strong in? And Mrs. Duval says, well, I'm not that flexible. Or I am flexible, I'm sorry. Let's talk more about that. So answer that question in your head. And we'll stop there in terms of McREL. I'm going to post the link, and I'm going to try to link back to McREL, because this is some real information here. It's not the only change model. I'm going to throw at least one more, if not two at you to think about. And you're going to make them your own as you consider how you make your action plan come together in some respects. And you're going to, especially as you start looking for strategies to put into the plan, and you're going to do your own reading and come up with some other premises to go along with that. All right, so that is a pretty good video. Again, now what I'm going to show you is a person who I've only become aware of through some of my own students, actually. I'm a little embarrassed to tell you that. And he is Simon Sinek. Now, Sinek is not an educator. Sinek is an organizational spokesperson. And it really was, he's about what I talked about earlier, and that is, how do you start a cultural transformation?
Like it's a marketing campaign. Where here's the launch date. So here's the biggest mistake companies make when they're doing cultural transformations. They treat it like it's a marketing campaign. Where here's the launch date, right? And here are all the programs we're going to make everybody go through. And here are all the PowerPoints, and here are all the executives that are going to give the PowerPoints. You're nodding yes, I'm getting something right. Right? And then it doesn't work. Or people are resistant, or fight, or don't show up, or even sabotage. And it's all well-intended. It's imperfect. And sometimes we get the cultural thing wrong or the timing wrong, but it's all well-intended, and it falls flat, and it's a big waste of time and a big waste of money, and we're right back where we started, right? There's something called the law of diffusion of innovations. This must become your best friend. Okay? The bell curve. All populations always sift across the standard deviation. If you have high performers, you have low performers. Always. And then you have an average. Always. In this room, there's a group of people I know who are nodding their heads going, yep, 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 yep. There's a group of people who think I'm an idiot and I wasted my money. But most people are like, I'm open. Yeah, this is interesting. I like some of it, you know? I know that. I know that going in every single time. And the fact that you all wanted to come and pay to be here and it's not a general industry thing, then I know that it's just a little more one way or the other, but it's still the standard deviation, always, right? What the law of diffusion tells us is that the first 2.5% of our population are innovators, big idea people, Steve Jobs, you know, Elon Musk. Then you have the next 12 to 13% of our population are early adopters, who are willing to sacrifice time, money, and energy to be a part of something that reflects their own beliefs. They stand in line to see the new Star Wars for 8 hours, even though you can just go in a week and just buy a ticket and go in. They thought that was a good use of time and money, right? Then you have the next, the early majority, the late majority, and your laggards. The only reason these people do something is because they have no choice anymore, right? What you're asking for in cultural transformation is this. How do we change our company, right? The problem is this group of people, the majority, they're cynical. They're practical. What's in it for me? What do I get if it goes wrong? Are you going to pay me extra if I have to stay late? You know? They're cynical and they're practical, right? These people, not so much, right? They'll just do something because they think it's great and they want to be a part of it. What the law of diffusion tells us is that you cannot achieve mass market success or stickiness for a new idea until you achieve 15 to 18% market penetration. It is the tipping point. It is a social phenomenon. If you ignore everything I tell you today about this, you will always get about 10%.
All right, now the word tipping point is a word that's entered the English vocabulary, American vocabulary. I mean, I would say the last 10 or 20 years, by way of Malcolm Gladwell. If you have nothing to do, read a Malcolm Gladwell book. There is a book called The Tipping Point, actually. He's a sociologist, doesn't speak about education so specifically, but he certainly talks about how groups respond to transformational issues. And he talks about the tipping point. You know, when does it suddenly become I can't think of a better word, it's probably an old man's word, to have shaved heads. When I was growing up, if you had a shaved head, you were some kind of criminal. And I wasn't happy about the fact that my father and grandparents were all bald. It wasn't an in thing. It's not, I wouldn't say it's in now, but it's certainly more nearly acceptable than not. But you can think of lots of things that fads that people suddenly take interest in, because you begin to see an accumulating number of people interested in it. Tipping point. What he's going to talk about in a moment is something called critical mass. And if he doesn't, I will next time around. That speaks to when something absolutely explodes and then suddenly becomes what people all want to do.
That's what you'll say. They just get it. We love them. They get it. And 10% of the company is going to be all in. It's not enough. And so this that Geoffrey Moore called the chasm, crossing the chasm, is the magical gap. And the way you get it is you don't talk to these people at all. You ignore them. And you aim at these people only, the early adopters, because these people do not want to try something new until someone else has tried it first. And let me tell you how it looks, because I've done it. So a large company, many, many more people than is in your company, 200,000 people, wanted me to help them do a millennial training program. So I said, great. I pull out my little pocket copy of the Law of Diffusion, because to me, this is religion. By the way, this is how I built my entire career. Remember that story I told you before, convinced me why I should hire you? He told me he was over here. He didn't tell me he was over here. I could hear that. I ignored him for now. I'll get him later. Right? Someone else will get him later. So here's what we did. What the company wanted to do was traditional. They wanted me to design the program. We're going to launch it. We're going to make videos. They want me to be on the videos. And then we're going to have the training program, and we're going to force all the millennials to go through the training program. It'll be amazing. And I'm thinking it's going to fail. So this is what I said. I said, I'm going to do one workshop once. And we will make it open to anybody born after 1984 only. Which means if you were born before 1984, you're not eligible. That keeps all the senior executives out. So they can't come and watch.
That sounds like a good place to end. All right, there's only a couple more minutes left on that video. I will post this up. I think the value of this for you is that you can see that dynamic of when people begin to pay attention to whether the change is and what kind of person you are. I kind of would like to think I'm a Steve Jobs, but I wish I'm not. I don't think that I am. I wish that I were, but I don't think that I am. But I think I am kind of an early adopter, which sometimes makes a fool out of me. But I tend to play in that part of the backyard, and I'm smiling because I'm kind of proud of that. But there's an awful lot of people who sit in that center section who don't join the critical mass, which we will come to down the line. Now, again, the Cynic video and the McREL videos will be posted, and I'm going to walk through them over the next couple of weeks and add some more videos as we move through. But what I want to do now, with time I have given myself to be remaining in this, is to go back to how these premises link back into Fullen and into Koza. Koza chapter 5, Fullen and Hargraves chapter 7. I'm not going to do all of them, but I will point out that on page 183 in the Fullen book, the Fullen and Hargraves book, he smiled. He begins to offer guidelines for school and district leaders. And he offers, I believe, 6. So we'll just do the first 3 for the moment, for this session. And some of them are pretty obvious, I think, but he affirms some of the things we've heard from Fullen's own video and from what the Dr. C, got his name, the fellow who was speaking in the McREL video as well. And some not necessarily so strongly. I haven't heard the premise, even from Fullen, where in the book he speaks to promoting professional capital vigorously and courageously. That is to say, building capacity. That is to say, offering training, offering chances for people to talk to each other, offering for chances and experiences for people to play in the sandbox and perhaps experiment and begin to develop new ideas. All right, and so he asked the question, for example, he talks about professional learning communities, which, believe it or not, is a relatively new idea. I don't know why it hasn't been around since Fred Flintstone days, but it really has not been around. It's relatively maybe 20 years old, maybe a little longer. Ricky Dufour, new word Four, is probably the best known person for PLCs, but there's other people as well out there. And Fullen goes on to say that is your professional learning community just a device for responding to the district's pressure for higher test scores? Or is your first priority in creating, engaging, and successful learning for all your students? Now, would you put PLCs in place in order for your groups, your innovations to take root, for your E&L changes to take root? I'm going to give you the answer, yes. And the but to that is, you're not going to snap your finger and drop 6 people in a room and say, okay, talk to each other. They've got to be trained how to be able to do that, how to listen to each other and work it through. Enough said. But I think those premises are kind of click into that little quick Fullen video that we did. I didn't hear it so much in Cynic at all. And you go in and you got a little whiff of it, just a tiny whiff of it from the McREL video as far as we've taken it. Another point that Fullen makes is know your people, understand their culture. I think I mentioned in the video Sunday, I had interviewed for a superintendency in Nassau County. I'm not going to tell you how many years ago. It was not a long time ago, but it was several years back. And it was just at a time when the state had drastically cut all state aid across the entire district, state. Big bucks change. And every district was trying to figure out ways to hold on to their teachers and reduce expenditures at the same time. Now, for some reason, and I'm usually a pretty good interviewer, I didn't think of it. I didn't think that might be a question. At the same time, my superintendent at the time, whom I respected very much, had a formula with a small f about how we reduce expenditures. And he had an analogy where he said, an onion has skins on it. If you take the skins off, in the middle of the onion is the most important part, and that's children. So you never do anything to cut that skin out. But there's things on the outside you can take it from. So I got a little nervous when I got the question asked of me at this interview. And I started to say some things, and as I was saying them, I knew they were stupid. I knew I had not thought it through well enough. And the board president looked at me, and I'll never forget it because it actually kind of hurt my feelings professionally. And that was, we would never do those things in this district. And that's when I knew I should get up and walk out of the room. I think I did tell you this story already, but it's worth repeating because I had not studied the culture. I was not aware of the culture. Ever since then, when I can't tell you how many of my students, doctoral students and PD students, I had a dime for every one. I have a house in Tuscany who have gotten positions, not because of me specifically, but because of their training, part of which I was involved with. And someone calls me up and says, "Hey, Dr. B, I got a job. I'm principal in XYZ place." I would say the same thing. First thing I say to them is, learn the culture. That doesn't mean that you have to accept it. It means you need to know it, because knowing the culture tells you what you need to know in order to make the changes that you feel are necessary. All right. And then the Fullen goes on to also say, and this happens, and you probably are more aware of this than I am recently anyway, and that is securing leadership stability and consistency. I'm going to go on a limb and say something that I'm not sure all of you will agree with me, and that's fine too. Let's go back. We have 2020, we have a Democrat elected. 2016, we have a Republican. 2012, a Democrat. 2008, a Democrat. 2004, a Republican. 2000, a Republican. We can keep going backwards. We have had almost no consistency of political leadership in the past 20 plus years. Probably longer than that. It's just off the top of my head is how I calculated that. Swinging this way, swinging that way, swinging this, and you're more than aware of the instability that seems to be the rule rather than the exception nowadays. So districts that or school systems that change their leaders like other people change their socks typically don't have a consistent approach to how they do things. And were you to get a job in a place like that, and they say, okay, you go create an E&L program, same thing comes back to know the culture. Once you assess the culture, then you know how you can manage the change that you've been charged to take care of and the one that you probably want to put in place. All right, so I'm going to stop there as far as Fullen is concerned with Chapter 7. I'll save the rest of that when we come back to this next week, and somebody's going to tell me when we're having that week off. Not that it matters to me, but I just kind of want to know. And then we'll go over to Dr. Koza and Chapter 5 for a moment. Well, in my view, Koza's Chapter 5 certainly applies to multi-age schools, multi-school age classrooms. And I endorse where she's coming from in this without hesitation. And speaks to any innovation, that large innovation that school systems perceive as necessary. And again, to come back to the opening conversation, this however long ago we started this video, is the same premise. I think I said this is going to be a shorter video. I'm almost done. Would be how do you manage change, any kind of change? I interviewed for a provost position in a college that was heavily technology. And I'm pretty good at technology. I wouldn't say I have an expert on it. And I have lots of opinions about technology should be used in school systems. And first question out of the box was, how would you handle technology in a classroom? Something along those lines. So without even thinking, I said, and by the way, this is a Zoom meeting across the country. I'm smiling. And I said, well, I said, at one time, a piece of chalk was an innovative change. And I heard, well, all over from Oregon to Florida, from Maine to San Diego, people sucking their breath in. But I was right. And I just rolled from there on that, and they offered me the job. I didn't take it, but they offered me the job because no one had thought about that. They hadn't realized that until we talked about how technology is a moving target. It's not necessarily the chat GPT thing that just came down the road about a month ago, and apparently already is becoming a little bit of a gimmick rather than a change, I think. But to come back to Dr. Koza's book, a change is a change is a change. In her case, she's drilling it down to multi-age classrooms. And in this case, I'm trying to be more specific to your ENL stripes. And she goes on to talk to quite a few points. But I think what I'll do with this right now is to speak to the broad issues that she speaks to. One is if you have a multi-age, well, she's talking about curriculum redesign for multi-age classrooms. I'm talking about curriculum change, systemic change, cross impacts for an ENL program. Not only for the ENL classes, but how it may affect the general education program, that impact word. We'll come back to that in a minute. What's the environment? And by environment, I mean, where is it? Literally, where is it? How is it shaped up? Is it chairs in rows, chairs in circles, no chairs, chairs out, school outside, school inside? Think about what environment really means. How does communication take place? That's a weakness of mine to some extent. Sometimes I don't communicate as well. I just think people should know what I'm thinking. And that isn't good. You have to pay attention to how or to what extent you're communicating. And that goes back to Sinek, actually, I think, in terms of communicating, and back to McRell in terms of community. See how these things start to cut across each other. And then what resources do you need? I'm going to stop there. I'm at a guess. We can just keep going. We have plenty of time to move these things through. And you have lives besides listening to Bernardo yammer at you. There's no assignment associated with any of these things. I kind of would like to give you a discussion question, but I also know you're up to here with things to do. So I just have to trust the fact that you will professionally think with me. That's the assignment. Think with me and sometimes for me. All right, you take care. See you next week.